Yep.
What am I christening it as?
Lisa, let me.
Pour it over this way?
Yep.
I christen thee. Lisa, let me.
That's good. That'll do.
A little bit of liquid courage.
It is December.
Okay.
You ready? Get in.
Oh, you're going to push me from here?
Yep, I'll launch you from here.
You don't want to push it further?
Nope.
Okay. Ready.
Good luck. Here we go. I'm coming.
It's okay.
There she goes. It floats.
Looking for leaf. Bye.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for leaves.
You good?
Just trying to, like I said, I've been to Girl Scout camp.
Yeah, I know. Your balance good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Get out.
I have you. I'm going to try to hold it level.
I think the only water in there is
The Prosecco.
Prosecco. Or liquid.
Well, my canoe project is done, and time to go over some lessons learned. I spent about a year reading books and watching YouTube videos, and there are some fantastic YouTube videos out there that will explain to you far better than I ever could how to build a canoe. The first lesson is watch some videos, read some books, and then start your project. And preparation is perhaps the most important thing. I spent, I don't know, 24, 36 hours doing preparation, and I messed some things up in it. For example, when I was milling my lumber, I should have taken more time in keeping the lumber separate. I had some darker planks, lighter planks, and I just ran them through my table saw and then through my router and didn't bother keeping them separated. So then when it came time to put the planks in, I tried to separate based on color, but I didn't do a very good job. Also, some people right here in the middle will do design work. And if you want to do that, and there's some great videos on how to do that, you want to do that in the beginning before you start laying planks. Also here on the side, there's some really nice finishes that you can do, and I may try that on my next canoe. And again, some terrific YouTube videos that I'll show you how to do that. But you want to have that set up before you start laying the strips in your canoe. The next thing is I would take more time with actually gluing the strips in place. I had a lot of gaps, I had a lot of separation. I didn't realize that was happening. There were some areas, especially down in here, where there's a gap between the wood. I thought I had filled it. I didn't do a very good job filling it. It's covered with the epoxy now, so it's not, I don't think, going to be a problem. But take more time with laying the strips. Now, I bought long strips. I bought 19, 18, and 17 foot long strips. You don't have to do that. I think if you buy long strips like that, it's going to increase the cost. If you buy shorter strips, you can join them together. And I did that in a couple of places with some white cedar that I had, and it looks fine. But if you want to save some money, look at that as a possibility. The next lesson, I guess, would be knowing what epoxy resin that you want to use. I went with the West system, and it worked great for me. I mean, it was fantastic. I used the 207 hardener, and I used that on hot days, and I used it on cool days, and I used it on cold days. And I got consistency throughout the process. So that was really helpful. Also, the varnish. I did a lot of reading on varnishes. A woman by the name of, I think it's Rebecca Wright, wrote a book on bright work. It's a fantastic book. There was a lot of really good information in there. When I was doing research on varnishes, it talked about not using varnishes below the waterline. And I think the reason for that is you're supposed to put varnish on a piece of wood and it's supposed to repel the rain, but it's not supposed to be used underwater. Well, in this case, you have to remember that the varnish is nothing more than think of it as a sunblock for the epoxy resin. The epoxy resin is what provides water tightness for the boat, holds it together, and the varnish protects the epoxy resin. So I spent a lot of, I don't want to say wasted time, but a lot of time researching varnishes to use. I ended up going with the Epiphanis, and it was fantastic, especially with the brush thinner. It really, really was an area that I had a great deal of trepidation with, but it was really easy to work with. I'm going to say really easy. I've never varnished before. I may have screwed the whole thing up and don't even realize it, but I think it turned out well. I had a hard time finding these bronze carriage bolts. I bought stainless steel carriage bolts and I really didn't want them. I finally found the bronze ones. I think it was Jamestown Distributors, and I had to order twice because I misordered size. These were entirely too long. So I went back and ordered, I think it was the 3-inch instead of the 4.5-inch. But in any case, that was a lesson learned. The fiberglassing. Oh, wait a minute, let me go back. Fairing. I've never sanded a project as much in my life. Fairing I almost said fuselage of the boat. Fairing the sides of the boat took a long time. So get yourself a really good dust mask, get yourself a pair of headphones that you can listen to music with, and go to town. And then on the inside, this is the part that I'm perhaps the least pleased with, because again, I used a random orbital sander, and there are other techniques that you can use. One of the recommended techniques was to take a bottle, a water bottle, put some water in it, put the lid on tight, wrap sandpaper around, and that'll give you the curve you need to get down here in the bilge. As it stands, I've not the smoothest sanding job, but I'm okay with it. At the end of the day, I'm okay with it. The next lesson I learned, and this is a big one, are these seats. My wife Lisa did the caning in the seats, and she spent a lot of time doing it, a lot of hard work. And then it came time to install the seats, and I'm here to tell you that I was really worried about doing that, because if I messed this up, then she was going to have to redo the caning. Now, I did the front seat first because it's wider. In case I messed that up, then I could do the rear seat. But the front seat went fine. Now I did the rear seat, and I had to do it right. And boy, was I a nervous wreck doing that. So I would recommend that once you get your boat built, and I don't know the timing to do this, but I would fit the seats before you do the caning. However that works out for you, I would just fit the seats before I do the caning. Because if you mess the seats up at that stage, you just make another set of seats. It's not that big of a deal. But once the caning is done, that's 24 hours of work that my wife put into each seat for the caning. And you really don't want to screw that up. And it's important because when you create these scuppers along your boat, you also have an area where you're going to hang the seat, and you have to hang the seat in that area. So if you mess up the cut, you can go back only a couple of inches and you get maybe one more chance at fixing it. So when it comes to fitting the seats, make your jig and then cut it big and ease up on what you need. And you'll just have to work through that. The fiberglassing, boy, everybody worries about fiberglassing, and I was no different. The first time I fiberglassed on this particular canoe, you have to reinforce the stem and the stern, and it was an unmitigated disaster. I'm not gonna lie to you, I just couldn't believe how bad I thought it turned out. And it wasn't that bad. I was able to wait for it to cure, go back the next day, and make sure you have a respirator when you do this. You do not want to sand uncured epoxy resin without a respirator on. I went back to sand smooth the area that I had done in the stem and the stern, and it turned out pretty well after sanding. I mean, it really did turn out pretty well. I didn't have to remove it and try again. I just sanded it smooth and it was fine. So that taught me that the fiberglassing was not as mysterious as I thought it was going to be. When you go to fiberglass the entire hull of the boat, you need a whole day. You just need a whole day, and a partner will help a great deal. I had my wife, and we started about 4 feet back from the stern of the canoe and worked our way towards the stern. Now, as I'm working my way towards the stern of the canoe, my wife is making her way forward, because you want to keep a wet edge while you're doing this. And that worked out really well. Once I finished the stern, I was able to come back, and we worked our way all the way to the stem, and together, me on one side, her on the other, and it went really well. When it came time to overlapping the fiberglass, I wasn't really sure how to do that. I followed the directions. I thought it was my wife who has done sewing, who realized what this was all about, and she said it's a lot like sewing. So if you know anyone who has done sewing, they can help you with the laying of the fiberglass in this direction and then coming in this direction. And again, when it finally cured, I did have some areas that needed to be sanded smooth, and I sanded them smooth. And it was fine because underneath, remember, I had already put in reinforcing strips. So there's plenty of fiberglass in the stem and the stern. What else? Oh, filling the cracks in the boat with an epoxy resin and flour mix. Boy, you know, you're busy sanding, fairing the boat, and then you have to go back and you have to fill in the cracks. And you mix up epoxy resin, add some wood flour to it, and you start filling the cracks. I didn't do a great job on this in all areas of the boat, but it's frustrating as all get out because you mix this up and an area that you've just sanded, you're now going to smear with epoxy resin that is tinted the color of other parts of the boat, and then you're going to sand that smooth, and it just seems like you're adding more work, but it really does need to be done, and it needs to be done well, and you need to take your time doing that. So make sure you take your time getting the cracks filled. Don't mix up a lot of epoxy resin. If it's hot out, I mixed up, I believe it was 6 ounces, and it was kind of hard to explain, but with the West system, they have a self-measuring pump. So I did 6 pumps of resin, 6 pumps of hardener, however many ounces that turns out to be, mixed in the wood flour to tint it and to thicken it up a little bit, and then started filling the holes. And by the time I was down to about 2 ounces remaining, it was already setting off. So you don't want to mix up a lot of that. Next time, I'll probably just go 4 pumps of the resin, 4 pumps of the hardener with wood flour. I'm sure there are other things I'm forgetting in lessons learned. I did learn a lot in doing this boat. One of the things that I'm disappointed in, because I don't know what went wrong, is the bottom. I have some areas here where the fiberglass apparently floated, and I'd feel a whole lot better if I knew what I did wrong to cause the fiberglass to float, but I don't. So I'm going to pay real close attention to that next time. It's fine. I'm not really overly concerned about it. It just bothers me because I don't know what I did wrong. If I know what I did wrong and I can correct it next time, then it's a lesson learned. But in this case, I didn't learn the lesson. So I'll have to do some research on it, and I'll have to pay closer attention the next time I do it. Again, this is not to teach you how to build a canoe. It was to show you how I built my canoe. And in a lot of the videos that I've watched over the past year on how to build a cedar strip canoe, it always seems to turn out just right. They don't show the areas where things went wrong. And I'm here to tell you, things are going to go wrong. I made some serious mistakes in this area. I'm not even sure where in the boat. I'd have to go looking for it. But I had an area inside that was probably a 1/4 inch, which means that the strips were just barely touching each other. So I had to fill in with the strip on the inside, and then on the outside I had to fill in with the strip, and then I had to sand everything fair. And that came from perhaps not paying attention to what I was doing. I have a neighbor whose father used to build the crew boats for Princeton University. I live in New Jersey, and I was complaining to her that I can't get the wood to always do what I want. And she kind of laughed and said, I remember my father saying the wood will go where the wood wants to go. And that was an example. The wood went where it wanted to go, and I just had to adapt to it. So you're gonna make mistakes along the way. Just use whatever woodworking skills you have to fix those mistakes. Now, as far as level of difficulty, I'm an average woodworker, and this was not that challenging from a woodworker perspective. It really was not. I would say if you know how to safely use a table saw, safely use a router, safely use a hand saw, and a sander, you can build this. It took me, I bought the cedar strips in May and began to machine them, and I put them aside, and then I really didn't start construction until July 1st. July 1st is when I started construction, and November 30th is when I was done. So that was 5 solid months of doing it. Now in that 5 months, I took 3 weeks of vacation, and also, and this is the part that's kind of funny, when it came time to, after I had faired the boat, sanded it smooth, and it was time to put the fiberglass on, I delayed. I went back, I watched videos. I spent a week watching videos, reading my books to make sure I knew I was prepared for what was coming next. And then I waited another week. I delayed 2 weeks before I said, okay, that's it. I'm going to go ahead and try it. And I didn't need to do that. A lot of people talk about the fiberglassing and how I don't want to say difficult, but you're just worried about it. Don't be. Just go ahead and do it. Make sure you have, for the gunnels, and if you're going to do scuppers, make sure you have your wood selected and purchased. And you can start working on that early in the project. For example, when you're running your cedar strips, the cedar strips take about 15 minutes each to put in the frame that you've created, in the mold, or I'm sorry, in the forms. So each strip takes about 15 minutes. You're going to work on it for 2.5 hours a day to get 3 strips on one side, 3 strips on the other. And then if you have nothing to do, make your seats one day. And then the next day, go ahead and make your gunnels. You're going to have to scarf the gunnels, and if you're going to do scuppers, you're going to have to do that as well. There's multiple techniques on how to do scuppers. One way is to buy thick 3/4 inch wood for the inwale and then route it out using a jig. That's certainly one way to achieve it. I went another way. I decided to do contrasting wood. So I did cherry, and then I filled it in with ash, and then I needed to trim the ash. And I did that on a day that I was waiting for cedar strips to dry. And I had these inwales and outwales sitting up and out of the way for probably a good 6 weeks, ready to go when the time came. And that was a time saver, if you will. I did make a mistake on the inwales and the outwales, and maybe even the decks a little bit. When I machined them, I of course sanded them smooth when I was done, and then I immediately put the epoxy resin on and sealed it in. Well, in doing that and putting them away, the inwale and the outwale, the gunnels, have not had the chance to change or darken to the deep cherry. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So this is cherry, this is cedar, this is ash, and then this is cherry, and that's cherry. So you can see that the thwart is a real nice deep kind of red cherry, but then the gunnel is not. And if I were to do this again, I would make sure that I allowed the gunnels to change to that rich, deep color before I coated them in anything. I think in my video series, I am pointing out mistakes that I made, so go back and watch those and understand that you will make mistakes in doing this. But at the end of the day, we put this in the water, it looked good, and it floats. And it may not look perfect, but it's a handmade canoe, and I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. So when the time comes for you to do it, just go ahead and do it, and have fun.